Hi, it's Trey Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, when should you start financial planning? When it comes to financial planning, you should start as soon as you can. Most times we start financial planning more in our 30s or 40s and our 50s as we get closer to retirement. But one of the biggest benefits you have to starting financial planning as early as possible is your time. And what I mean by that is if someone has 30 years before they plan on retiring, the amount of money they have to put in each month is much smaller because of this thing we call compounding interest. Compounding interest is a very fancy way of just saying that the money that I put in early is working for me to make me more money. And as long as my money keeps working for me, that's the less amount of work I have to do. And so you continue putting money in every single month, no matter what the amount is, you will find that you could retire even earlier than you thought if you start early enough. Because realistically, you could put a plan together where someone can invest for 10 years and they should be able to retire pretty comfortably. If you gave yourself 20 years, then you should be even better situated. 30 years, it's almost a knockout of the park. And so if it becomes the opportunity for you to start investing early, for you to start allocating your money in a more effective way, then that ultimately means that you should have a financial plan in place as soon as possible. Now, for some, that just may not make that much sense for you in the beginning. You either don't want the investment of having a financial planner, or you just really are dealing with like your student loans and different debt. But you will find that the good financial planners are able to put a plan together that also helps you to get out of debt quicker than you originally were, where your money is working in such an effective way that you're able to get rid of your debt, including your student loans. You're able to take on new responsibilities. Maybe you want to get married to have a family. Maybe you want to get a house or a new car, where you really start putting a plan in place for all of this. Because more times than not, if you've seen it, 65% of Americans are retiring broke, which means they have about $5,000 or less. They just don't have any money to retire. And 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, which means the amount of money that they make every single check that they are, one layoff from being in a financial catastrophe. As a result, you can see the importance of financial planning. We should all be able to build up an emergency fund, but sometimes it just feels very overwhelming because we feel like we have all these bills we have to pay, all these things that are going on today, that it becomes very difficult for us to even see the future. And so that is usually where it becomes a big benefit for someone to actually have a financial planner, because as long as you have a financial plan in place, then you can be very intentional with your money, where even though you may not be able to allocate as much as you think you should towards retirement, even if you're able to put $20 from every check, $50 every month, whatever the amount is, you'll be surprised, because what ends up happening is as you put the money away, in a year, you're going to be like, wow, I didn't expect to have this much money set aside. This is actually like a really good feeling. And that feeling is going to drive you to put even more money away, because now you have the belief that it is possible. You went from saying it's not even possible to allocate any money towards my financial plans, to my dreams, to the goals that I have, to being able to say every little bit goes towards something, because it takes $1 to get to 100. It takes 1 penny to get to $1. It takes a bunch of dollars to get to 1,000, and so on and so forth. But it all starts with 1 cent. And there's really no other way to look at it. So as long as you have a plan in place where you're allocating a percentage of your income every single year towards your financial dreams, then it is more likely that you will achieve your financial dreams. Most people find it very difficult to achieve their financial dreams because they're so stuck in the present, in the circumstances of the now, that it becomes very difficult for them to even imagine what success looks like. And if you have a financial plan in place, that is your success blueprint. It already lays out everything that you're going to do over the next however long your plan is set for, and it shows you what the result is going to be. When I put financial plans together, I use this program called Right Capital, and it gives you the percentage of probability of success using the Monte Carlo simulation, which is a very fancy way of saying it runs like 1,000 different scenarios, and then it tells you how many of those scenarios that particular financial plan worked for. Now, we then would say, okay, well, how long do I think I'm going to live? Generally, I'd just say we're going to live to 100. Yes, the average is more like 87, but if we say we're going to live to 100 and we have a plan that has like 80% or higher of success, well, then we already are being very conservative. So that really means that it's a very high likelihood that everything's going to work out. Now, you can do this, of course, for yourself. There's lots of different retirement calculators and investment calculators where you can see the returns on your investments, and you can see what the performance of different stocks are, to where you're able to put the plan in place. Because as long as you know what you're going to do with your money, then it's more likely that you're going to do it. Right? If you've ever seen them talk about people working out, they say pack your bag the night before, put your shoes and your clothes out the night before, so that way when the alarm goes off, you wake up, it's more likely that you'll go to the gym. Take someone with you. There's lots of different things that they say to do to help you. All of those strategies for eating and working out and exercising are also true for financial planning. If you lay everything out ahead of time, if you set up the accounts where money automatically doesn't even come to your bank account, it goes to your investment account, the same amount from every check, to where eventually you just get used to it. You don't even think about the money going to that account. That's why so many Americans enjoy their health savings account, because the money goes inside of it and they don't even really think about it. Well, imagine automating all of your finances because you have a financial plan in place. So that is why it's very important that each of us puts a financial plan in place as early as we possibly can. Now, that may be you sitting with your parents early on because they want to discuss it with you. It may be you talking to someone at your bank. It may be you watching videos from people like me. It may be sitting down with someone in a professional, or just going at it on your own. Whatever that looks like, you want to make sure that you are taking it seriously and putting a financial plan in place, because you want to be able to have the plan, the blueprint of how you're going to achieve success, but you also want to make sure that you look at that plan, because success and happiness changes for us. Things that were important to you at 20 may not be important to you at 30. So you want to be able to look at your plan every year, every two, be able to say, this is what I'm trying to do. Is this still where I want to go? Because many times as we get older, our priorities change. Where we have a family, we grow things, where there's certain cities we don't want to live in anymore because it's not as good of a city for a family as it is for my professional career. And then you may get older and you may decide, yeah, I didn't realize how important having land on water is for me. And I thought I just wanted to live in the city to be close to work, but I actually kind of like getting away from that sometimes. Our priorities change, and that is what you keep using to update your financial plan. You're like, okay, I wanted to retire in this city. Is that still true? Nope. I want to retire in this city now. Or maybe you want to retire in a different country. You just keep looking at your plan each year, seeing how it adjusts based on your own personal needs and preferences, and then keep updating it with information as you get it. Where you don't have a will because you said you didn't have any assets, but maybe the next time you look at it, you say, okay, now is the time for me to get a will. I have kids, I have assets. It's very important that I set them up. I don't want them to be arguing in court over my assets. And as long as you have that financial plan in place, it's not really a question about, do I have enough for a plan? It's a question of, can I sit down and make a plan, and am I willing to adjust the plan as things change? You don't want to keep going hoping that you get to the end result and then you'll get the financial plan. More times than not, we have to have the financial plan in place to get to the result that we're looking for. Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Living Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, what are the 7 steps of financial planning? When it comes to financial planning, the way you want to think of it is, there is a goal that I have to achieve, and I want to have a plan to do it. That's ultimately what a financial plan is. Now, along the way, we have to decide many different things between what the investments that we should take, how long that plan should be realistically for me to achieve it, how much money do I have to allocate every month or every week or every year towards it. There's lots of questions that come into it, but very high level, a financial plan is just that. It is a plan for your finances to achieve certain goals that you have for yourself. And those goals could be anything from a house to a baby to a car to retirement, the legacy that you want to leave your kids, to starting a business. Really anything that you would allocate money towards, it would be good for you to have a financial plan to know exactly when, where, and how to move that money. So that leads us into the first step. And the first step is to really understand your client's goals. That is for us as fiduciary advisors, where we want to understand you and your needs. If you're making the plan yourself, then you want to understand yourself and your needs. This is going to be done with open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, just a variety of questions. Some will be quantitative, where we're talking about the numbers and the nuts and the bolts. Some of them will be qualitative, where we're talking about the emotions and the goals and the dreams. but you really have to have an understanding of both to put a good financial plan together. So on the open-ended, I may ask you, what does retirement look like for you? On the qualitative, I may say, how do you feel about retiring in your 30s? If I wanted to ask close-ended questions, I may say, how much do you want to spend in retirement each month? There are lots of different questions that will help me to be able to understand you and your needs, so that way when I'm making recommendations, they make sense to you. The biggest problem I see is that there are lots of people trying to manufacture problems for their solutions, where they have one or two solutions and they have to be able to find people that fit in that box. The way I would describe it is if you've ever seen like a baby where they have like those blocks and they have like triangles and blocks and circles, and then they're given like certain little shapes and they have to like pluck the shapes in each of them and it has to go on the correct one. And then sometimes the baby will be trying to like jam a triangle into the circle, but it doesn't really work. Or they'll be trying to put the circle in the square and it doesn't quite fit. Well, sometimes if they bang it hard enough, it goes through every so often. And that's how I feel about financial planners that are just focusing on getting rid of their solutions, even though they don't know if the person has that problem. And so I think it's very important that you start with understanding what it is that your success looks like, how retirement looks, what your goals are, your emotions as far as investing. And then when you create the plan, it is designed exactly to your liking. Number two is identifying and selecting goals, and it's just as it sounds. Once you have the starting position where you understand how much money you have today, how much money you'll need in the future, and when you understand certain things about your emotional appetite and whether that is the investing aspect of it, or if you're really interested in real estate, or you really feel really good about gold, or you want to start a business, whatever that looks like, once you have that understanding of yourself, we can then say, okay, based on everything we've gone over, let's start putting them in order of importance. So we'll say, okay, these are the 5 things that I really think are very important to accomplish. But then you may say that these other 5 would be icing on the cake. So we prioritize your goals. And then as an advisor, I'll help you select which ones I think makes the most sense based on the overall picture that we have, where this goal seems to be aligned with the family legacy that you want to leave, and this one seems to be important for your traveling and your health, where we work together to make sure that we're identifying the goals that match exactly what it is that you want so that you're able to accomplish your goals long term. Now, the other aspect of that is we have a list of goals, but all of them can't be accomplished at the same time. Some goals we can accomplish in a year. Others may take 5, and some may take 10, 15, 20 years. So we often will take the time to say, all right, based on this list of goals and the priorities that I have, how many years do I expect it to take for me to accomplish this? Now, some of them is going to be based on your time frame, right? Like you may say, I really want to travel. Well, how much are you going to be able to allocate towards work, and how much are you going to be able to take off from work? How much money can we put aside each month to be able to go towards this goal? And then we're able to say, okay, based on that information, this should be a 5-year goal, where we work together to make sure it makes sense for you. But we want to make sure that the goals are aligned with the understandings that you have of yourself, and then you're really able to move nicely into step 3, which is just analyzing your current course of action. So what have we done so far to accomplish this goal? Have we been dabbling in investments in the market, or investments within businesses, or in the real estate? What is it that you have been doing so far? How much of your income have you been allocating towards this? Is it $50 a month? Is it $100 a month? Is it $1,000 a month? How much money have you been putting towards this? And I often like to see what that looks like as a percentage of your income, because I think it really gives a better picture, because sometimes the dollar amount may feel low or it may feel high, but when you know it as a percentage of your income, it really kind of, it kind of levels everything out, where it just makes the most sense, where you're saying, okay, I'm allocating 5% of my income towards this goal that I have for myself. How does that make me feel? I'm allocating 25% of my income towards this goal I have for myself. How does that make me feel? Or I'm allocating like 1.5% towards this goal. How does that make me feel? Because each of us, we have different timelines, so it doesn't mean that any one of the numbers are really good or not so good. But I do think when you look at it from a percentage, it just really helps you to understand how much you're allocating, how much you're putting towards these life goals that you have set for yourself. And so number 3, often you want to make sure, hey, what is it that I'm doing? How is it working? How do I make it feel? Is there any tweaks that we can make to what you're already doing? Because if you're already doing something, then sometimes we can find what's called revenue neutral. And what that means is you have $100 going towards this account and you have $100 going towards that account. Well, what if we're able to reduce those two accounts by like $50, and then you put $100 towards your new investments, where it's revenue neutral? You're still spending the same, $200 a month, but it's being allocated differently. Now, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes, and many of the times, we have to put more towards it. And then that's other things that we can do with the overall debt aspect of it, which we won't really peel back too much of the onion in this particular video. But sometimes if you're able to consolidate debt, or if you're able to get better interest rates or refinance certain debt, you're able to free up some of that money, what we would call cash flow, and allocate it towards your goal while making the same payments that you already were. And sometimes you're able to work it in a way that, okay, well, I don't have the money that I want now, but when I get the raise, that entire 3%, 5%, 10% is going to go towards my investments because I have the plan in place. So now I know where to put my money when I have extra money. And so there's lots of ways to look at it, but you want to make sure that you're understanding your current course of action so that you know if there's any tweaks that you need to make, or if you need to make a full, complete change in a completely different direction, which doesn't happen as often, but it does happen. So for step 4, you're pretty much done if you're working with a fiduciary financial planner, and you would just kind of relax and enjoy yourself. And then we would start working on the financial plan. And if you're doing it yourself, well, this is where you start putting all your numbers together to then create your own financial plan. And the financial plan is just really putting everything that we've discussed together in a way that's going to help you achieve the goals that we identified in step 2, using the assets that we identified in step 1, and then adjusting or adding to the course of actions that you already have taken in step 3. And when you put all of that together, you should be able to put a financial plan together that makes a lot of sense to you. And then that leads very nicely into step 5, which is just we present the findings. If we work on the financial plan, everything that we've discussed, it is your plan, even though we put it together, so we present it to you. Now, based on that feedback, we can either enact that plan or we can make tweaks to it. If for some reason you're like, you know what, I've been thinking about it, and even though I said at the first meeting that it was really important for me to retire in 5 years, I actually just got this promotion, or I just got this new job, or something has changed, and now I'm okay working for 10 years. Or the opposite is true. I thought 5 years or I thought 10 years was going to be enough, and I just found out that the company was bought out, so things have changed. So we need to maybe double the investments that I make so that I can be able to retire in 2 years, where I can retire in like half the time. There's lots of adjustments that you'll make along the way, but we present the plan to you, and then we get your feedback, and then based on that, we have the plan that we're able to move forward with. And as long as everything's okay with that, that's exactly what we do. Step 6 is just implementing the plan. Once you have the plan is only as good as the action that you take on it. So we want to make sure that we're taking all the action that we agreed upon. The money that goes into the accounts that we already outlined in the plan, and they go in the monthly or the annual frequency with a certain dollar amount that we already agreed upon. We've already gone over all the likelihood of success based on historical averages and different things in the investments, and then we really just put that plan into place. We leave ourselves a little bit of wiggle room because things happen, right? That's the truth. Things happen. But as long as we have baked that into our cake, where we're understanding that everything may not be rainbows and Skittles all the time, but as long as I have the plan in place and I'm taking the action, I should be able to make adjustments. And then that leads us to our final step, which is step 7, which is just you monitor your progress. Along the way, things are going to change. Your goals may change. You may want a bigger house. Your family may change. You may have a larger family. Your income should change as you're gaining experience and getting promotions and things like that, where you have more money. So you may want to maintain a larger lifestyle than you previously put in the plan. And then also things change with the market, where we're investing in certain industries and those industries don't look as well anymore. Certain companies, things have changed, where all of this needs to be re-looked at least on an annual basis. There's many people that we look semi-annually, quarterly. I probably wouldn't do much more than quarterly, but there are some people that maybe want to look at it monthly. But you do get monthly statements on your investment, so that is one thing. But as far as meeting with your actual advisor, you probably don't need to meet monthly. But if you want to meet quarterly just to kind of talk it out, well, that's always fine. But it's really up to you. But so you can meet anywhere from 4 times a year to 1 time a year. There are some people that maybe meet like 2 or 3 times every 5 years, but that's less common because our lives are changing so much. But you do have that flexibility and that option. If you're creating your own financial plan, then you should just want to look at it. I would say maybe every New Year's, right? Every New Year's, you just kind of look at it and say, this is how the past 12 months went. This is how the next 12 months should go. How am I doing as far as my projection? Am I still on track to be able to accomplish the goals that I set for myself? If you're not, you may need to make some tweaks. But if you are, then you may be fine. If you look at the fundamentals of the investments that you chose, even if you're slightly off after a year, but you still like your investments, then you should just stay, because that ultimately means that you'll be buying your stocks at a discount, or you'll be buying, if it's real estate at a discount. And so you should continue to follow the plan as long as you're comfortable with it, as long as the fundamentals still make sense in your plan. And so in closing, again, the 7 steps of financial planning are to understand your overall needs, your client's needs, identifying and setting goals, analyzing the current course of actions that we've taken, developing a financial plan, presenting the financial plan, implementing the financial plan, and then monitoring the financial plan. Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, what is a good retirement income? When it comes to retirement income, most of the time it starts with just, hey, what is a good income? And that's going to depend on a variety of factors that we're going to discuss today. First and foremost, you will notice that the amount that makes a good retirement income is going to change from state to state. If you are in the state with the highest retirement income, then you are in the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia has about $43,000 is what the average, or at least the median, retirement income is. As a result, you would say, okay, well, if I have $43,000, then that's going to be pretty good for me to live in the District of Columbia. Now, the lowest retirement income is in Indiana. That amount is like $20,521. And then the median is somewhere around like $26,000 a year. So if you live in Indiana, you don't need the $43,000, or at least based on the median, you don't need the $43,000. Now we'll talk about some other factors that do impact what makes a good retirement income, but just the difference in the state that you live in, you can see that it significantly changes what would be considered a good retirement income. Now you also want to be considering your expenses. What expenses are you going to take into retirement? More times than not, that's why a lot of people think it's a great place to start by just saying, if I have 80% of my income before retirement in retirement, then I know I'm going to be doing pretty good. The thought is you'll have less money going towards taxes because you would pay little to no taxes, and that's always what people are hoping for. But I caution that thought process because it is also true that you may have more expenses related to healthcare. The job that you had was subsidizing some of your healthcare expenses. And when you don't have that career anymore, that means that you have to cover all of the healthcare expenses. Healthcare ends up becoming a much larger portion of people's bills. Now, some people will have plans of using like Medicare or Medicaid, but there's different rules that qualify you for it. So you want to make sure you at least take a look at that before you make that your plan to help you with your healthcare expenses. But it is a good place to start, where if you just say 80% of what I make now, then that's what I'm going to have. And then you would take a list of your expenses, and you would say, okay, these are all the expenses I have now. I plan on getting rid of this expense by the time I retire, and I also plan on getting rid of these expenses by the time I retire. If you get rid of those and then count up the expenses, then you already have a pretty good idea of how much you would need in retirement, what would make a good income. You also want to keep in mind that you may not even live in the country. If you plan on moving to a different country, then you'd want to look at things like the exchange rates to see how much further or shorter your dollar goes there. There are some countries where your dollar is going to increase the amount of lifestyle that you can have by 200-300%. And there's other states where it would be a haircut to live in that state and have to exchange and pay for things using your American dollar. So you want to make sure that you keep these things in mind. Other things to keep in mind when determining what makes a good retirement income is the overall lifestyle that you plan on having and your life expectancy. For lifestyle, do you plan on traveling a lot? Do you plan on eating out at fancy restaurants? Do you plan on staying in all the most beautiful places all over the world? Or do you plan on kind of hanging out at your house and maybe have the grandkids over? Do you plan on sitting on your porch or reading a book or gardening and things like that? The amount of income that you would need is going to be significantly different based on those two different types of lifestyles. You also want to keep your average life expectancy in mind. The average life expectancy in the United States is 79 years old. Now we know that women live a little bit longer than men, and then your own genes will help you determine, how long you believe that you would live based on just how long your grandparents lived and your great grandparents and things like that. Are you healthy? Are you worried? Do you have things, your eating habits, how much exercise you get? All these things would come into life expectancy. Generally, if you want to play it safe, I would just say plan to live to 100 years old. If you live to 100 and then you put a financial plan in place that allows you to be able to maintain your lifestyle to 100, then you should feel really good about your retirement income. What makes a good retirement income can also differ by age. Someone who is 55 to 59 would have a median household income of $81,500. That is going to be the highest earning potential that most of us have. We're just about to retire, so we've already worked our way through the corporate ladder, and we're usually at a pretty high level position. So no surprise that the median income would be the highest in your retirement from 55 to 59. That number lowers to 70,000 for households that are 60 to 64. It is 60,000 for households 65 to 69, 53,000 for households 70 to 74, and then it lowers to 37,000 for households 75 and older. So the thought could be twofold. On the one end, you could say, okay, well, obviously I'm working, I'm generating an income, so I'm able to make my most money from 55 to 59. And then as I get older, I'm living off of the money that I have saved up, that I have stored, or I'm just living off of my investments and my interest in my rental properties, however you've designed your retirement income. And as a result, you end up using a little bit less money. Now, by the time you're 75, it should be reasonable that you've probably paid off most of your expenses, so you may be able to live comfortably off of that $37,000. But keeping in mind, depending on the state and the country that you live in, you may have to make an adjustment on how much you want. This is simply the median, and that's just saying that if you line up how much everybody makes and put it in order from least to greatest and pick the middle number, that's what the median is. So you want to be able to say, okay, based on my situation, I feel like my situation is going to be a little bit more expensive than someone else's. Well, then you should increase how much money you feel is a good retirement income. If you feel like you're going to be living a little bit simpler than others, or maybe you've gotten rid of all of your bills and you feel like you just don't have as many expenses as the average person, well, then you can lower what would be a good retirement income for you. So usually it's a great place to start with 80% of your income currently. And that usually takes into consideration the state that you live in and the cost of living, and also takes in your lifestyle in consideration. And so both of those are usually already baked in that. That's why they usually start you there. And then from there, you can decide whether that makes the most sense for you. Are you going to be moving? So do you need a little bit more? Is there a higher cost of living in the state that you're going to or the country that you're going to? Or could you have a little bit less because there is a lower cost of living in the state or country that you're moving to? You would then say, okay, based on my life expectancy of my family, I expect to live this long. Now, keep in mind, the average life expectancy is 79 years old. So you just plan, and like I said, if you're not sure and you want to be super safe, just plan to live to 100. That's usually how I do all my financial planning. We just plan to live to 100, and then everything else is just icing. Then so you would just make your plan like that, and then you should be more comfortable as far as a good retirement income. Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, what is the median retirement savings by age? And we'll let you know whether that's enough for your retirement savings. When it comes to the amount of savings that you'd want to have for retirement by age, we're really going to break it into like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I mean, that's roughly a good place to have it set at. The data that we're going to get is coming from the Trans-American Center for Retirement Studies, and then we will go over how much they say people actually have, roughly their median, by each of the ages, and then we'll talk about just maybe a decent gauge, right? It's very difficult to say how much you would personally need without knowing like your entire financial situation. That means like your debt, your lifestyle, the city you're living in, things like that. But I can give you at least a rough range to have a feeling. What I can tell you up front is the median amount that people actually have and the amount that they'd roughly want to have, there's a big difference between the two. Now, when I'm coming up with the numbers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the median income in America, and then I'm going to extrapolate the numbers that you'd roughly want to have saved based on that. So currently in 2022, the median income is $67,521. So if you're making that amount of income, then we'll give you the numbers based on that. So if you make a little less than that, you make a little more than that, you can sort of do the same amount as far as the calculations, but I will let you know how to do that. So first and foremost, when you're in your 20s, it's roughly estimated that the median household has about $16,000 saved towards their retirement, which is fine. Most of the data that you'll see, they don't actually really talk a lot about the amount that you want to have in your 20s. The big thing is we encourage you to get started in your 20s. There's lots of data that shows if you allow compounding interest from your investments, someone who starts in their 20s invest, I think the number was like $8,000 a year for 10 years, they would end up investing more than someone starting in their mid 30s investing $8,000 a year until they retired at 65, just because of the way that compounding interest works, even if you're getting the same return. So we always encourage you to get started in your 20s. I wouldn't be as concerned as much about the money because that's going to come. But if you build the habit of living in a certain amount of your means where you're able to put a certain percentage of your income away, I would say roughly if you're able to at least put 5% of your income away, then you're off to a good start. And then you want to see, but ideally if you can build it up to 10, 20%, that would be a really good place to start. You want to build those healthy habits now. Most of the time what I see is when people are in their 20s, when they're saving money, it's not that they're saving it for their retirement, they're saving it for a car, or they're saving it for a baby, or they're saving it for a house, right? We're saving it for a large expense because we have a lot of things going on when we first leave out into the world. So if you're able to just get in the habit of saving money for saving's sake, just so that your money can grow and then it can give you the freedom that you need to make a lot more choices as far as how you spend your time, because you don't have to trade your time for money, and instead you're trading your money for time, which is a great place to be. When you're in your 30s, the median retirement savings is $45,000. That's what is actually in the accounts of most people in their 30s. Now, roughly, you'd want to have somewhere around 1 to 2 times your income. That would be a good number to have. So if you're somewhere around that median income of $67,000, then you'd want to be around $140,000 saved for your retirement in your 30s. As you move into your 40s, the amount that most actually have for their retirement, the median amount, is $63,000. But at that age, you want to have 3 to 4 times your income. So you'd want to be closer to $300,000. So you'd want to have, if the median income is 67, if that works for you, then you'd want to have around $270,000 saved by the time you're in your 40s. Ideally, a good way to think of it is you really want to get very close to about in your 50s that we're really close to about at least about half of our income is coming from our money. So that way we have a lot more flexibility, a lot more freedom. We're able to make a lot more choices that are beneficial to you, where you're not thinking as much about your money and responsibilities and your debts, but you're able to start thinking about your passions and your purpose and the enjoyment that you have in life, your family, your business, things like that. As you move into your 50s, you would like to be somewhere around $500,000. So you want to have about 500,000. If you're using the median amount of 67,000, you'd be somewhere around 6 to 7 times your income, and that's where you would gauge yourself as far as if you're doing okay and keeping on track. That would roughly be around $470,000 if you're 7 times that income. But I usually would say, look, try to get close to that 500,000, get close to that $500,000. What you'll find is $117,000 is where we actually are at. Most people, when they're in their 50s, they have about $117,000 set aside for their retirement savings, and that's usually the median that they're at. As you move into your 60s, and that's where most people are starting to get to the point where they're like, okay, I'm going to retire. Now, granted, if you can get to the numbers earlier, then by all means, make the decision earlier. If you're someone who genuinely enjoys what you're doing, then push the number back. We're just simply talking about the median amounts, that this is what's generally happening. But it doesn't mean that that has to be your plan and your amounts. But if you are going to be in your 60s, you want to be around 8 to 10 times your income. So that amount ends up being, if you on the median, right? So about $680,000 is going to put you around 10 times of your income. Generally, you'll hear most people say you really want to get to at least $1 million. And the reason is pretty simple. You're going to be living off of the return that your investments are making, and your returns have to cover things like inflation, and then also has to cover just whatever livelihood and expenses and lifestyle that you want to have in retirement. So if you're, let's say you've gotten more conservative, where now you have about 5% as your returns in your 60s, because you don't have really that extra time to be losing a significant portion of your money. So instead of getting maybe that 10, 15, 20, whatever the return you were getting, now you're down in that 5% range. So you would be living off of 5% of your income. So if you're living off of 5% of 675,000, that's about $33,000 a year. Now, that amount, depending on your situation, may work for you, but that amount, depending on your situation, may not work for you. So I would generally encourage you to try to get at least to that million amount. And maybe what that means is we have to maybe go slightly longer to get to that amount, but I find that you'll enjoy your retirement a lot more. Just based on the inflation, the value of the dollar, the time that we're all living, things like that, usually it's going to be, you'll feel a lot better. And so you'd want to have a plan that puts that in place. Now, at the same time, if you're going to retire even longer, if you're someone that wants to retire like early, then you'll need more than that amount, of course, because you're going to be retired for a lot more years. So you'll need a larger amount, because you probably still have a lifestyle and certain bills and certain things where you can't really get your expenses underneath that $30,000 range. Doesn't mean you can't. I'm just saying, generally speaking, that's just how the numbers end up working. So once we get retired, once we're empty nesters, everybody's gone. We're not maybe as active in our business, whether we've given it to the next generation or we sold it, however that worked out for you. You generally are like, okay, I've paid off a lot of things. I'm able to just use this money for my retirement, my lifestyle, my enjoyment. And so you'll just make that decision that makes the most sense to you. Now, if you're wondering what people actually have, the median retirement savings that people actually have is $172,000 according to the Trans-American Center for Retirement Studies. So on average, people actually have $172,000, and then they're making their decisions, from there as far as the lifestyle that they have and what they'll end up doing. This leads into, right, if we don't have the number that we have, then we may be able to have like a mini retirement. Maybe you take off a few years to travel, see some things with your family, enjoy life a little bit, with the plan of coming back to working in 5 years or so, 10 years or so, in a different capacity. That could be an option for you. It may make sense for what your plan is. Others, they just want to keep working so that they can make up for the difference. And so they'll just be able to save a lot more, where people are saving 50, 60, 70% of their income in the last maybe 5 years. And so they're able to make up a lot of lost ground and put themselves in a really good position. But I did want to share with you what the median retirement savings is by age and roughly how much you actually would want to have. Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, how do millionaires become millionaires? So I get this question rather frequently when it comes to financial planning. People are always trying to figure out, how do they get the money that they need where they don't have to think about money or worry about money, or they feel like they don't have to really plan for different things where the money is in the account. Now, I often tell people you still want to be intentional with your money no matter how much you have. And the reason is very simple. The habits that you built that created your wealth are the habits that you'll want to maintain to continue to maintain your wealth. There are also the habits that you want to instill in your children and different loved ones that see the way you interact with money so that they can mimic your success. If you only do it just to get to the mountaintop, well, don't be surprised if you start sliding back on the way down. And it's the same as if you were like working out and you're like, okay, I want to run a marathon, or I want to be able to do a 5K, or I want to do whatever activity that you set for yourself. And you go and you train and you do this for several months, and then you accomplish the goal. If you just let it go after that, where you're like, okay, I accomplished my goal, I'm done. Well, don't be surprised that you find yourself sliding and losing all of the gains, all of the momentum, all the good habits that you have built. So more times than not, when it talks about money, we're talking about building lifetime habits that you're going to maintain regardless of the amount of money that you have. Now, to just answer the question of how millionaires make their money, the IRS has actually answered that for us. And so we have taken the 7 streams of income that you find that millionaires have, and then we'll discuss those today. These are all a part of the Wisdometric Framework, because I believe wisdom is the ability to use the knowledge that other people have, the experiences that other people have, to create the same results for yourself. So the first one is earned income. Earned income is just what you think. That's the money that you get when you go to your job and you get paid an hourly wage. However you earn the money, it's active income. It's money that you're going to be generating by trading your time for that money. Now, you could be getting paid a commission or a salary. You could get paid hourly, or you can get paid like in some stipend. I mean, you can really put it any way, but if you are earning this money by trading your time for it, well, then that is what we would consider earned income. That's active income. That is where most people start. Most people start with earned income. And the reason is simple. We have to build some sort of trade, some sort of skill set that allows us the ability to be able to translate that into something profitable, whether we start a business or whether you file for a patent or something like that. And we'll get into those other streams of income later. But the simplest one, the easiest one for us to learn at a very early age and to start engaging with the economy in, that's going to be your earned income. The second one is going to be your profits. Now, this is going to be income that's generated from a business. Now, when I talk about a business, we're really talking about, hey, very simply, your profit is your revenue minus your expenses. The money that you have left over is your profits. So as you generate a profit, that money comes back to you. Now, you may decide, I'm going to reinvest this money in the business. I'm going to, increase my inventory. I'm going to open up franchises. I'm going to buy another building. Whatever you're going to decide to do, that ultimately was still your money to decide with. It was no different than when you first started the business and you invested your money from that money that you had from earned income. This money is just from the profits of the business. So that is the second one, which is usually the transition that most of us make. We have earned income, we learn a skill set, a trade of some kind, and then we decide, okay, I'm going to start building some sort of a business with my skill set so that I'm able to decide how much income I have. And if I build it the right way, I won't have to trade my time for money. The third one is your interest income. This is what you often find in like your savings account. This is going to be money that you get like a couple percent here, and I'm being very generous, right? But you get a couple percent here, you get 1.5% there. Maybe your CDs would probably count in this one. Anytime you buy debt where you're not buying equity in a company, so this could be like treasury bills and bonds from the government, anything like that is where you generate interest. You don't buy like equity from stock in a company or anything like that. This is just the interest that you build. The fourth one is going to be capital gains. So that moves us into the stock market. And when you have capital gains, that means you have held the stock for at least 1 year and a day. And once you have it for a year and a day, now you are charged a lower tax rate that is considered capital gains. And so that's usually around like 15%. The big benefit you have here is if you have a stock for less than a year, that is charged as just your regular income. And so you're being incentivized to leave the money in the company, and then you get rewarded as an owner. This is another form of ownership, because even though you didn't like build the company that you invested in, it's almost like you're a silent partner. So because you're like a silent partner, you get some of the benefits of it. Sometimes you vote for the board and you get like dividends, which is just sharing the profits that the company has made. There's lots of different advantages that you can have from owning stock in a company that is the same as being like a silent partner in a business that like your friend started. The fifth one is your investment income. And this is really just focusing on a portion of the stock portfolio, but this portion is where we get money back through dividends. And dividends is when a company generates a certain amount of revenue, a certain amount of profit, and then they decide, you know what, I'm not going to reinvest this money back in the company. I'm going to pay this money out to the owners. And you, as the stockholder, are the owner in the company. So they will take a certain amount of revenue and they'll give it back to you. Now, more times than not, the dividend is going to be reserved for very large companies that are no longer in the expansion phase, but they are now focusing on giving the money back and just kind of holding their footprint. Now, sometimes you find some smaller companies that give a dividend just to attract investors, but those usually aren't long-lasting dividends. And so you want to keep in mind just how much revenue the company is generating, how much profits they have, and whether it actually makes sense for them to be able to give that dividend. And I guess what I'm really saying is you don't want to pick a stock solely because it pays a dividend. While this is a stream of income that millionaires share, they are very selective in the type of stocks that they invest in. We're not just dividend shopping, but we're investing in solid companies that we believe in their marketing plan, their leadership, and their future goals that they have set, the vision overall. And as a result, that company happens to give a dividend, and we enjoy the reward of that. So I don't want you to be dividend hunting, but I do want you to recognize that that is a form of income, and you have the choice of reinvesting that as well, just like if you had your own business and we talked about earlier, where you can reinvest it and buy more stock in the company, or you can pull the dividend out. That is always your choice. The sixth one is your rental income. 9 out of 10 times we're talking about real estate. This is just where you have a real estate portfolio and you are able to put like tenants in those buildings, or however it works out for you, where you're generating an income based off of that. And then that money, you have the same option as always, where you can put that money in another investment. And that investment could be in the stock market, that investment could be in another business, that investment could be in more real estate. You have that option available to you. But rental income is a great source of income, and a lot of people like to shift from their earned income straight to their rental income. And the reason is they feel like they have a tangible product, where even if I don't necessarily pick the best real estate, I at least have a plot of land that if I can't rent it out, I could sell it. If I can't sell it, then I will, build something, or I'll live in it, where you feel like because you have that tangible asset, that gives you a little bit of comfort and a little bit of, let's say like a plan B, C, and D, where your first thought was, okay, I'm going to have a tenant living here, life is going to be great, but let's say no one wants to rent it, or we have to kick the renters out, whatever is happening. Well, you can then decide, maybe I'll live there, or maybe I'll see if I'm able to rent it out for a different venue, where it's like maybe like weddings, if it's like a beautiful home off the beach or something like that, where maybe you don't get a tenant, but you can rent it out. And that could be like Airbnb as well, where you just have more options available, where you can even sell the property. And so a lot of people like that option as well, but it is something that you want to make sure you're comfortable understanding when you choose the first property. I see it where it doesn't always work out for people because you just jump right in. And it's one of those things where people feel like they can time the market. Just like in stocks, where like, okay, I'm going to buy like the dip or something like that, people will say. People feel that way as well. Like, I'm going to buy the dip, so once the recession starts and prices start dropping, then, I'm going to be waiting to buy it. Or we're in this top of the bubble and I'm going to try to sell this property at the top of the bubble, and I'm just going to be waiting for the moment that the bubble is going to pop. And so you want to just not be that comfortable and that risky. We're talking always about long-term investments, where you're building a legacy for yourself, whether that is an early retirement, a normal retirement, or a legacy for future generations, where you pass your portfolio on to them. Always be thinking long-term. We're not trying to time things as much. Now, if you want to do that with like some of your extra money, like your play money is kind of what I talk about, then totally fine. But if we're talking about building something long-term and sustainable, then it's just like any other investment. We're investing for the future, and we want to make sure that we believe in the future of whatever we put our money into. And then the last one is your royalty income. So royalties could be where you trademark something, where you patent something, where you just have intellectual property, right? Any sort of form where you have ownership over something, but you're not interested in going the whole way, where you start like your own business, where you're marketing, where you're selling, but you're just like, you know what, I got a great idea, I got a patent, I'm going to give this to you, someone else's company, and then they're going to take it across the finish line. And for doing that, they're going to pay me a percentage of the revenue. So instead of me getting 100% of the revenue if I do everything, if I just let someone else do it with my patent, maybe they'll give me 5, 10, 15% or something like that, probably more like 5 or under. But as a result, over the years, that can become a lot, especially depending on how large the company is that you gave your patent to. And so it's your choice on those revenue streams. You'll find that most millionaires, according to the IRS, have at least 3 streams of income. Of these 7 streams of income, they have at least 3 of them. You'll find that is 65% of millionaires in the U.S. have at least 3 streams of income. And when you go even higher, right, like the number gets smaller. So the people who have 4 streams, well, the number drops to like 40%. And then the number drops even lower when we talk about who has like 5 streams of income. So I often tell people, let's start with figuring out how to create 3 streams of income. And when you do that, you'll be on track among the 65% of millionaires. That is how they created their millions. Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be answering the question, what are 7 things I should be doing as I get near retirement? When it comes to retirement, and we're talking about being near retirement, we're talking usually about like 5 years from retirement, sometimes 10, definitely not more than that, where you want to say, okay, There are a few things that I know I need to do as I get closer to retirement, and I don't want to do it all in my last year because that may mess up my retirement. Where if you give yourself enough time, you feel like you'll be able to check everything off the box. So when it comes to near retirement, the first thing that we want to make sure that we do is you always want to start with your goals. And we talk about how that motivates and pushes you through the most difficult times. When you know why you're doing something, it makes it that much easier to keep doing it. And the example that I've given you guys for my kids is when I remember when Pokemon first came out when I was in middle school and I wanted to buy Pokemon Red. So back then, the two versions were called Pokemon Red and Blue, and I decided I was going to get Pokemon Red. Well, I had to take my $5 allowance and I had to save that each week until I was able to buy the Pokemon game. And I put the game on layaway. And so my parents would take me to Walmart every week or every two, and I would put my allowance towards the game. And then after a month or two, something like that, I was able to buy the game. I think the game was like $40. Well, that was something that I was motivated by. If I was just told to save $5 every week, it wouldn't have felt the same because I would have thought of all these great things I could have, spent my money on at like the Dollar Tree or something like that, where I would have been able to buy these little trinkets. But because I had such a clear vision of what my goal was, I was motivated by the Pokemon game that I was very willing to forego all of those short term and silly little things I could have wasted my money on to buy the game. And that was one of the best experiences that I've had, where as far as my parents teaching me that you have to save for the things that you want and not be distracted by these little things that you think that you want. So usually, as I mentioned to you guys, we're talking about maybe two to three life goals. How are we looking on those? We set them up in our financial plan. Now we're getting closer to retirement. How are we looking on those 2 to 3 life goals? Have we been able to align our short-term goals to help us achieve our medium-term goals, to help us achieve our long-term goals? And so you want to just look at that. How am I doing on those life goals? Second, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of your expenses. And we're not just talking about your day-to-day expenses, we're talking about some replacement expenses. I have a client who has a Tesla, and he told me that a new Tesla engine usually costs somewhere around like $10,000, and the engine is good for about 20 years. Well, that means that we're going to have to replace that engine at least once in retirement. So we need to make sure that we are budgeting for that expense if he plans on maintaining that car. You may also want to budget for things like your roof. You have to get a new roof. Well, if you plan on living in the house that you're living in, well, you're going to want to make sure that you have that included in your budget. Then, of course, your regular things like, am I going to travel? Am I going to eat out? How often am I going to travel? How many grandkids do I have? Do I want to get them Christmas presents? Like, what are these different budgets? Because we have to make sure that they are included. You don't just want to take care of your normal expenses like food and shelter and transportation, but you also want to say, how will my health care change as a result of me not working? Because my job is currently subsidizing some of my healthcare expenses. If I have to pay all of it, then what does that look like? If my plan was to use Medicare to help me with my healthcare expenses, what are their qualifications? What does my income need to look like? What does my assets need to look like? You just want to list out all of the expenses that you believe you'll have in retirement, and then you want to set that aside to where you're able to account for that in your budget. Whether you're talking about spending a portion of it in your day-to-day expenses, or you're talking about the portion you need to save every single month to make sure that you are set up for success when it comes to your retirement. Third on the list is you may want to look at consolidating some of your retirement accounts. The Bureau of Labor says that we have on average about 11 jobs over our lifetime. So you may be looking at 11 different retirement accounts at 11 different places. If you were consolidating them as you went into each employer, well, then this is maybe something that you don't have to worry about. But if you have multiple accounts, as you need to make your income withdrawal plan, how you're going to be able to afford your lifestyle, you may want to have all of the money at least in 2 or 3 accounts, if not finding a way to put them all into one account. It just makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to withdraw your money out. Now, there is tax implications for you moving the accounts from like a pre-tax to an after-tax where you have to pay some taxes. You may be retiring in your 30s, so you may have to leave some of your money in your early withdrawal accounts where they have penalties associated with them if you take the money out before 59 and a half. There are lots of things that you want to look at, but you want to see if it's possible for you to combine some of your retirement accounts without you incurring any sort of a tax or a penalty. Fourth, you want to look at your Social Security, see what that looks like. How much are they going to be giving you as far as is estimated? You can go to the Social Security website and they will give you an estimate of how much they believe you'll be able to get on an annual basis, and then you can figure out how much you would have on a monthly basis. Now, if you have heard where it makes sense for you to be able to postpone withdrawing from your Social Security because you're able to get more out, well, that is true. Where you decide if it makes sense for you to withdraw Social Security at 70, or if you want to withdraw it at 64, or if you want to draw it even a little bit earlier. If you want to decide whether it makes sense for you to withdraw from Social Security early, or if you want to wait till like you're 70, for instance, all you need to do is take the difference in the amount of money that you have. So let's say the Social Security office, if you withdrew the money at 64, they were going to give you $600 a month. And then let's say if you waited until 70, they were going to give you $1,000 a month. Well, that extra $400 times the number of months in a year, which is 12. So 400 times 12 is 4,800. So you'll be looking at getting about an extra $5,000 a month. And then what you would do is you would say, if I took my Social Security out at that $600 a month from 64 to 70, well, 600 times 12 is 7,200. So you would say, okay, my $7,200 times that 7 years, well, that's going to be about $50,000 that I would have gotten. So that means I would need to live 10 additional years to be able to make that extra $5,000 a year times the 10 years. Well, that would be the $50,000. So if you plan on living past 80, then it would make sense for you to go ahead and say, I'm going to hold off on getting my Social Security until 70. If you don't plan on being around that long, well, then it doesn't make sense for you. So you should take advantage of your Social Security right away. Now, naturally, we have financial constraints that may make it impossible for us to be able to wait until 70. But when you're 5 years out, now you could say, okay, well, it makes sense for me to be able to withdraw my Social Security at 70. So I need to have assets in place to ensure that I can afford my lifestyle from 64 to 70 so that I can then get the max amount of Social Security. That leads us very nicely into the fifth thing that you want to do as you near retirement, and that is making sure that you have your income plan set up. And what I mean is, right now you have a bag full of money somewhere, and that money is going to have to be able to maintain your lifestyle for the rest of your life. You do not plan on working again. That's what we call retirement. Retirement on the one end is pure financial freedom. You have control of your life and you don't have to trade your time for money, but you trade the money for time. On the other end, you are now unemployed and you have no way to increase your assets by trading your time for money. I mean, technically you could unretire and go back to work, but that's not what we're trying to do. So you don't have a way to turn your time back into money. So as a result, you have to figure out exactly how I'm going to turn my money into my time. And so you're going to have to put that income plan in place. Now, there's different rules that you'll see where some people will say, oh yeah, the 4% rule is great, which is a very fancy way of saying you just live off of the 4% returns that your portfolio makes. So if you have a conservative investment, so you drop down from 10, 15, 20% returns to like 4 or 5% returns because you're trying to be conservative, well, that means your account is growing by that 5% every year. So if you live off of that interest, then you shouldn't run out of money because you're always generating that same 5% every year as you're spending that same 5%. Then so some people say, that 4% rule, that's good. Some will say the number needs to be lower, where it's like a 3% rule. However you want to create your income plan as far as turning those assets into income, that's what you want to do. If you have real estate, are you going to sell some of the real estate, or are you just going to live off of the rental income from your real estate? Do you maybe have a government position where you're in drop, where they give you a lump sum of money after a certain period of time, and then it's up to you to put that money in an annuity to turn it into an income, to put it in the stock market to turn it into an income, or you just kind of keep the money because you're very nervous and you don't know what to do with it, where you just keep it in a CD or something? Well, in a CD, you're not going to keep up with inflation, so I wouldn't recommend that, because that would be the same as having like a 3% loss on your portfolio every single year if you account for inflation. Inflation is lowering the value of that money, so you have to, or at least it's highly recommended that you at least keep your money somewhere that keeps up with inflation. But you want to have this income plan in place. At 5 years out, you are going to take the time to be able to say, this is where my money is going to go, and this is how it's going to generate my income, and I'm going to be able to maintain my certain lifestyle based off of those returns from my investments. I have clients who took their retirement money and then started a business and a passion project, or they started a 501c3. And whatever it is that you end up wanting to do, you just need to have the income plan in place. You need to have a plan of what you're going to do with your bag of money to turn that into a check that you can then live off of for the rest of your life. The sixth thing you want to do as you near retirement is rebalancing and reallocating your assets. You do not want to have yourself exposed to a lot of risk in whatever market or business or real estate, selling art, whatever the adventure is that you are currently allocating your money towards. You want to make sure that you're getting more conservative as you near retirement. Not so much so that you're no longer even making enough of an income to keep up with inflation, but you do want to make sure that you are protecting yourself against the possible market loss. One asset allocation is whatever your age is, that's how much money that you need to have protected and out of the aggressive market. So for example, if you're 20 years old, then you should have 20% of your money safe. So the safe would be in like bonds or in cash, CDs, things that are generally going to have a much smaller return, but you also don't have to worry about the money disappearing. When you're 40 years old, then you would have 40% of your income in the bonds and cash, and have the other 60% invested in the equities and aggressively in the market. When you're 60 years old, then as you guessed, you would have 60% of your money in bonds and cash, and you'd have 40% still in the market aggressively allocated. When you're 80 years old, you would have 80% of your money conservatively protected, and you would have 20% of your money aggressively still in the stocks in the market. There are lots of different ways for you to do your asset allocation, but you do want to make sure that you are keeping track of that. Whether you adjust it every 5 years or if you adjust it every 10 years, you do want to make sure you're adjusting it. Now, there are some people who are a little more active where they adjust it every year. Basically, whenever they get an email about updating their employee benefits, they go ahead and adjust their asset allocation to match their years. There's lots of ways to do the asset allocation, but this is just one of the examples. You do want to make sure you're adjusting it. You should not have the same asset allocation at 50 that you had at 20. You shouldn't have the same allocation at 30 that you have at 80. And so you just want to make sure whatever that plan is, that you are adjusting it as you get older, so that way you're locking in some of your gains and protecting yourself from a possible recession, as generally that does happen on a cycle about every 10 years. You don't want to get caught in your retirement or nearing your retirement where we're dipping into a recession and you're losing 20 to 50% of your portfolio. If you could limit it, it would be much better for you. The seventh and final thing that you want to do as you near retirement is you want to check your wills. Just make sure that you have everybody that you want in there as a beneficiary. If anything has changed in your relationships with your spouse or your kids, if people have passed, if people have moved on, you don't want them listed as the beneficiary if, for example, you've remarried. You don't want them listed as the beneficiary if, for example, they're not 18 yet, because they're not old enough to be able to enter into a contract. And so generally your government is not going to give them the benefits. So you want to make sure that you have these things lined up. You also want to just look at your life insurance. Are you planning on keeping any, or are you getting rid of all of it? Do you need to have a living will? Do you need to make any adjustments in a power of attorney? What are the things that you want to make sure that you have set up so that if something health-wise happens to you, that your assets will be protected? If something just unexpectedly happens to you and you pass, you want to make sure that your legacy is protected. It would be a shame for you to have so successfully built such an amazing legacy, and then for some reason the legacy isn't executed exactly the way that you had envisioned it, or you really would have counted like a grandchild if you had been reminded to update it. Whatever the situation is, you just simply want to make sure that you give yourself a little bit of time to take a look at that. Until next time, Wisdomites, remember, wisdom is asking the right questions to allow yourself to get the right answers. Keep asking those questions and you will keep getting those answers. Continue blessings.